I'm Devon Sportsman Trooper. I kind of head up the inflatable engineering design here for these plugs, which is pretty much all of our inflatable line stops that we do here. So this presentation is going to put together. It shows a lot of what we do. It's not everything of what we do, but it'll kind of walk you through some of the things. Um, yeah, it just talks about some of the products we offer. A lot of times we have a lot of customers that'll reach out to us and they'll have a problem and they don't even know necessarily what they need, but we can come up with something custom or adapt something or customize something to be what they need. So we have a lot of options here. Um, we talked briefly about some of our products here. So the PeteStop, I think, is the one that you guys are mostly speaking about here. It's the live installation line stop plug. We also have some variations for end of the pipe, just regular blocking for sealing off a pipe through the end. The DrainJet here was our original patent when the company started over 100 years ago. 1916, it was patented. It can get installed in a line, it'll seal it off, and then be able to flush out blockages behind it. Um, Then we also make miscellaneous inflatables, annular seals, pretty much any shape you can think of or size you can think of, we can make it. We just had a quote yesterday for a 17-foot diameter annular seal. So like a duck balloon, we can make just about anything. We also make a selection of mechanical plugs in all different shapes and sizes as well. Rectangular bulkheads, round, hexagonal, whatever shape too, we can customize for that as well. So flexibility is kind of our strong suite here. Here's a picture of the original sewer flusher that we patented. You can see in 1916 here, George Petersen. It's actually, I think, Phil's grandfather. Phil just joined the call. He was the owner of the company that started the company. So we still make them in various sizes here as well. Not as relevant to you guys and for what you do likely. Um, Here's our multi-flex pipe plugs. So I don't know how much you guys use these, but this would kind of operate in the same market as like a lot of the churney plugs, a lot of your just general, plumbing, blocking, sealing plugs. You can install them by divers and end of the pipes, whatever area. These have some advantages over your standard rubber plugs in that they deflate down a lot smaller. Like our 24-inch goes down to 4 inches. It makes it really easy to navigate bends and turns. They're also very flexible, so easy for a diver to install, just very lightweight, high strength. Because it's a fabric construction and not purely rubber, it's much better with cracking and punctures. Um, again, with the flexibility, it can go form to a pipe very well. These are very highly customizable. The rubber plugs are made in bulk with molds, and you need a whole new mold setup to create each one. With our fabric construction, we can customize very easily to all different shapes and sizes, different materials, so we can deal with different chemicals, temperatures, a lot of flexibility there. And then with the minimal pressure here in relation to like a mechanical plug, you have that sealing pressure spread out over a larger area, so you're exerting less force on that pipe wall, which makes a lot um, less damaging to possibly a fragile or thin-walled pipe than something like a mechanical plug. They're also very reusable. They're made out of very high performance, highly duty fabric, so they're very resilient to damage to things in the pipe. A lot harder damage than the rubber plug. So here's some of the variations. The 113 is kind of our base plug here. It's our lowest cost, just a ballistic nylon outer, very small deflated diameter. Then we can step up to nitrile coating on it. It also has connections at both ends. So if you want to connect two together and plate them in series, you can. These come in a higher pressure variation as well. The 115 series has a bypass on it, basically like the 114, but we're going to throw a bypass in if you want to bleed behind the plug. Then we have a 124 and 125 series, which they have a longer contact length than the others. They're still nitrile coated, also higher pressure. So the 124 is very similar to the 114, just a longer contact length and higher pressure for a better seal. The 125 is again similar, has a larger bypass. Again, nitrile, higher pressure. And then the 127 series here is our highest pressure, so we can get pretty high pressures on these guys over here. We also make a variation of this for through the valve, where we can insert it, we can bolt onto a valve, and just like we insert for our line stops into a live pipe, we can insert in line with a pipe to get it past a valve, seal it off, and then replace that valve. So we can talk about more about that if you guys want, but that is another tool we have in our toolbox here. We also have these 126 series. These we can pretty much, the main thing is we can have more flexibility with a bypass, and we can get some higher pressures with these that are like rigid core plugs that take some of the force. We also have a double block variation of the 127 here as well. Same plug, pretty much we put two in series, and you can bleed in between. There's also a bypass through, and you just have a more reliable seal, and you can monitor leak bypass that first plug and bleed it if you need to. We also make these packer carriers. These are mostly used to install pipe lining. So it's the industry where you put a liner over one of these, you put it into the pipe, you inflate it, it presses against the pipe wall. There's a variety of these. They have the, room temperature epoxy cures where they impregnate a liner, slide it over, adhere it to the pipe wall with one of these and let it cure. There's a steam cure variation. So we make these packers to be able to withstand hot steam that they can pump in and steam cure a liner in place. We can make them in long straight lines. We can make them for T's and Y's and different shapes. There's a lot of customizability there as well. We can make them with bypasses as well, as shown here. Some customers like this is like a centering jig to basically, as you pull down the pipe, make sure it stays in the center of the pipe. But a lot of customization will place there too if you're in pipe lining at all. Then here's our general PeteStop, which is I think the product that you guys are primarily looking into. So the general components, we have the line stop down here. This is what actually inflates in the pipe, seals it off. They have an inflation ram adapter here typically connected to it, which connects the plug to the actual insertion ram. You have a centering anchor here, which helps support the plug in that area where the coupon was taken out and centers it in the pipe. And then we have our ram section that actually gets pushed into the pipe. Call this our launch cylinder that holds the plug as you bolt it onto the pipe, and then it retracts back into it. This is just a retraction bar. It can bolt onto the top here and give you a pull point to pull it back out. Then you have your general inflation paraphernalia. This is a low pressure alarm, an inflation controller, hoses, some random parts and kits. So that's kind of our basic system. It does vary a little bit depending on the size. Bigger systems might have a little bit different style holding it in place as your forces get larger and larger. But that's the general system. We'll quote usually a whole system with a product, and it includes a manual, shows how to put it together, walks you through in a lot more detail how to put it together, what works. We do offer training on our site as well if you guys need help with seeing how it goes together. But it's one of those systems, once you do it a few times, it's fairly intuitive. So with the PeteStop, if you compare it to like your standard mechanical stop, there's a lot of advantages here. One, it's a lot faster, a lot less expensive. You're dealing with much smaller equipment, much smaller tap holes than with a mechanical plug, especially when you get to those large sizes. If you're dealing with like a 60-inch pipe, for example, we can get even a higher pressure plug through like a 20-inch or smaller tap hole and seal off a 60-inch pipe. So you have a much cheaper tapping machine, a much cheaper saddle, a much cheaper valve, much smaller equipment to hold everything in because it's a whole lot lighter. So it turns a massive operation into a much more manageable job with our system. You have a lot less stress on the pipe due to a smaller tap hole, so you're leaving a lot more of your pipeline integrity intact. You have a much larger contact area, so you have a mechanical plug, you're concentrating a lot of that force to lock it into place and to seal it in a very small area. Your rubber seal might seal in an inch or two, so you can get a lot of force over that inch or two, versus our plugs spread out that force over a large area and seal over a large area, so a lot less stress on that pipe. Again, with a smaller tap hole, you have much less risk of your pipe breaking or cracking, failures in the future. you're leaving most of your pipeline integrity intact in comparison to a size-on-size tap. Because it's inflatable, you have a lot of flexibility. The plug can stretch, it can deform. So if your pipe is out of round, you have Welby, it's corrosion. It does a much better job of deforming around those and sealing around those instead of just having a leak. You have an oval pipe, mechanical plug's not going to seal very well because it only can expand so much. Very versatile. We can do different pressures, chemicals, temperatures, just like we were talking about with the multi-flex plugs. These are a fabric product that we can fabricate custom for every job, so we have a lot of flexibility there. Very good for limited space. If you're indoors, if you have limited headroom, we can deal with much smaller spaces than a mechanical plug because our equipment is so much smaller. And just with the inflatable plug, it compacts down very tight. We do have a lot of combinations of this. Like you mentioned, we do have a double block and bleed configuration. We can do an off-center plug. We can do a flow stop if we're dealing with a high flow situation. Normally, you kind of want to avoid flow with these. And we have a high pressure configuration as well. We can deal with much higher pressures. Even what's on our website, we can often push those pressures higher than what we state on the website. So just because the website says we can build a plug to 120 psi doesn't mean we can't go past that. So there's a lot of flexibility there. And to show you an example here of a double block flow stop here. So it still goes in a single tap and then it inflates out both sides and inflates on both sides of the tap. And then you can bleed or monitor through the middle like you guys were talking about. So we have that ability as well with these stops. You can also do double taps and insert two plugs too if you want to do it that way for a double block. They are very reusable. Typically, they can be used many, many times as long as they aren't damaged. It can be damaged when you insert it. You always want to inspect it after an insertion, but often they are pretty reusable. People also use them with a mechanical stop sometimes. If your mechanical stop isn't sealing, you can insert a mechanical stop and an inflatable stop and have them work in conjunction. That's not uncommon either. We have our 128 series, which goes down in the line, inflates to one side. This is a typically lower pressure, but a smaller tap hole option here. The 129 series is our standard option, kind of just our general workhorse here, very reliable. Goes down, inflates to both sides and seals it off like this. Our 129/8 series here is our flow stop. So it has an anchor that goes down in the pipe and blocks some of the flow to allow that plug to expand and not get affected by the flow as much. So this one has a larger tap hole because it has a large diameter anchor here. Still smaller than the nominal pipe size typically, at least for larger sizes. When you get to smaller sizes, some of that tap hole advantage goes away where you end up having a close to size-on-size tap depending on pressure. And then again, here's the 127 series. This is a through the valve stop. So you have a valve right here. We can bolt onto it, open the valve, insert, seal it off, and then we can remove this valve and swap it out if you want to change it out. So that's that one. We have a bunch of different ways you can install one. Here's one installed on a vertical pipe. Upside down, there's a pipe on the roof here, sideways, there's an angled pipe. There's one, like Tammy was mentioning, on an elbow, so the plug can actually conform and seal inside of this elbow here. One on the side of an elbow. Here's a bypass situation like you guys were kind of talking about, where you have a tap with a bypass and then plugs in here to seal it off. Double line stop, again, here's double block and bleed. It's sort of two plugs and put a bleed in the middle. And here's a limited space option. So you can see there's a door right here, the pipe's right here. There's like really no other option to get a stop in there with this limited space. And our system can collapse down and get an insertion like this in place. So there's some of the advantages there with just being able to install a lot of these situations. You can see it's indoor, you have limited space, and one of these just becomes a really good option. Here's the case study we did. Team Incorporated sent us some information on it. They did a little case study and tested a seal on here. But they went in an elbow, let it inflate like this, and just test the seal out. I know we have a bunch of case studies on our website. There's some on LinkedIn. I'm talking about different ways we installed these plugs, but there's a lot of flexibility there with how these work. So here's some of our contractors that use it commonly. A lot of these contractors do a lot of stops with us. Team, TD Williamson, Rangeline. There's a bunch here that do a lot of work with us and it gets used all over the world. Other inflatables, again, here's a little annular seal. This one can be used in like a manhole situation where they threw a pipe in here as a bypass so you can seal around the pipe and they can divert the water through while they do work, reline the manhole, repair it, whatever needs to be done. Keep it dewatered in there. A few other pictures here. This was a big tourist bladder that we built, actually for NASA. And so we can do a lot of custom work. You use something weird, we can fab up something custom very easily here. Some more just custom bladders. This was a large tunnel seal that we made for a uranium mine up in Canada. I think this one was 30 feet in diameter, if I remember right, or I'm at 20 some feet in diameter. So this one got installed by our ROV down deep underwater. So we can build pretty much any size, deal with a lot of flexibility. There's some more custom inflatables we built over the years. We kind of we'll do just about anything. If you give us a design, a challenge, we'll fab something up for you.
That one was installed under 450 meters of water in a mine, which is quite a challenge, but it worked.
Yeah. And I think this picture's in here just as an example. This was this bladder here. But we inflated it with water to test it, and you can see it just crumpled this shipping container that we had it resting against. So especially with those larger plugs, you just have to be aware of that hydrostatic force. It can build up very quickly because you have such a large surface area. So I just thought it was interesting. We also do mechanical plate plugs. This one was installed in a water plant in Charleston, North Carolina. They had to drop this down through like a manhole opening, take it down the pipe, unfold it, lock it in place, and seal it. So this was a whole operation, but we made a custom solution for them to create a bulkhead to be able to clean and do maintenance on their pipeline. It was for drinking water, so the whole thing was like NSF treated and safe for drinking water. I think it was in place for a few months. So we do stuff like this as well. Some of our different variations here, we have a double blocking bleed mechanical seal as well. This is general test plug, bulkhead style. We do smaller diameter plugs as well, just for random testing and different stuff with bypasses. So some of these we can also use as a through the valve solution, like we did with some of the multi-flex plugs. And we do a lot of custom ones. We can do like gripper areas, we can do rectangular bulkheads, mechanical annulars, different stuff like that we go with as well. We had a case study here too on this folding mechanical plug. Some pictures of it in place here and then dropping it into the pipe. So yeah, there's a lot of good case studies on our website if you guys want to pace through some of that. Another case study here on a mechanical through the valve. It works very much the same as the inflatable one we were talking about, but you just go through a valve, set your mechanical, you can seal it off, pop out your valve, replace it. This was a job here in like a mine, I believe it was, or a tunnel, where they had to swap out this valve that had stopped working on them. So here's some of our materials that we work with. Our base material, we mostly work with ballistic nylon or Kevlar. We do have some few other options we have done in the past, but these two we keep in stock and work with very commonly. You can see we mostly swap to the Kevlar for puncture resistance or temperature because it's much higher rated. They have their benefits, and then we can deal with a lot of different coatings. EPDM, nitrile, Viton, polyurethane are all very common. Some of these are a little more niche if needed, but most of these will deal with a lot of what you need, depending on what kind of chemical you're working in. We can customize that a lot. So these first four we all keep in stock in good quantities. So yeah, that's our basic presentation. So I guess if you guys have any questions and you want to know more about something, we can dig into any one of those different product lines.